So now we go on with the chart. After Hasitopada, you find Kama, Vachara, Sobhana, Kusala. Sometimes. And then Kama, Vachara, Sobhana, Vipaka, 8, depend on heart base always, because they do not arise in the Arupa Vachara realm. And then Kama, Vachara, Sobhana, Kiriya, 8, depend on heart base sometimes. And then Rupa Vachara, 15, depend on heart base always, because they do not arise in Arupa Vachara Brahmas. When you get the Arupa Vachara jhanas, then you don't get the Rupa Vachara jhanas. So they do not arise in the Arupa Vachara realm, and so they depend on a heart base always. And then Arupa Vachara Kusala depend on heart base sometimes, because Arupa Vachara Kusala can arise in human world or in Rupa Brahma world also. So they depend on Hadya Vatu sometimes only. But Arupa Vachara Vipaka, 4, they arise in Arupa Vachara Brahmas only. And so here they do not depend on any base, so no Vatu. And then Arupa Vachara Kiriya, the same. They depend on heart base sometimes. And then Sotapati Magga. Now Sotapati Magga is singled out from the other Lokuttara consciousness. So Sotapati Magga here depend on Hadya Vatu always. That means Sotapati Magga cannot arise in the Arupa Vachara realm. And the remaining 7 supramundane consciousness can arise in Arupa Vachara realm, and so they depend on Hadya Vatu heart base sometimes only. So sometimes only means when they arise in the Kama Vachara realm and Rupa Vachara realm, they depend on heart base, and when they arise in Arupa Vachara realm, they do not, they depend on Hadya Vatu sometimes only. So this is how the different types of consciousness depend on different bases. So actually those that depend on heart base always are those that do not arise in the Arupa Vachara realms. So they are dosa mula 2 consciousness associated with ill will. They do not arise in Arupa Vachara realm, so they depend on heart base always. And then Manodhatu 3, the receiving and 5 sense door adverting, they do not arise in the Arupa Vachara realm. Santirana, investigating 3 also, and Hasitopada do not arise in Arupa Vachara. And then Kama Vachara Sobhana Vipaka, they do not arise in Arupa Vachara realm, they arise in Kama Vachara realm only. And then Rupa Vachara 15, they do not arise in Arupa Vachara realm, and so they always depend on heart base. And then the last one is Sotapati Magga. Now Sotapati Magga cannot arise in the Arupa Vachara realm, because in order to become a Sotapanna, you need to hear from someone. So if you do not hear, means hear the Dhamma or hear the instructions. If you do not hear the Dhamma, if you do not hear the instructions, you cannot get Sotapati Magga, or you cannot become a Sotapanna. So Sotapati Magga cannot arise in the Arupa Vachara realm, so it depends on Hadya Vatu or heart base always. Now if we read the diagram across, so we know that the 2 types of consciousness depend on eye base, and they are seeing consciousness. And then 2 depend on ear base, 2 on nose base, 2 on tongue base, and 2 on body base. And then with regard to heart base, we have 2 varieties, and the one is depending on heart always, and the other depending on heart sometimes only. So those depending on heart always are altogether 33 types of consciousness, and those that depend on heart base sometimes only are 42, and those that never depend on any base are only 4. They are 4 arubhavachara vipaka. Now let us go to this basic chart. Look at the first Citta of Lobha Mula. So depend on what base? Depend on heart base sometimes. And then 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th depend on heart base sometimes. And then the first of the 2 associated with ill will. So it depends on heart base always. And the second one also heart base always. And then the other 2, those rooted in moha, depend on heart base sometimes. And then let us take the 2 seeing consciousnesses together. So 2 seeing consciousness depend on eye base, the next ear base, nose base, tongue base, body base. Now the 2 blue circles, they are receiving consciousness, so they depend on Hadaya Vatu, heart base always. And then the red one, it is Santirana or investigating. So it depends on heart base always. And then the other 2 always. Now we go to 5 sense door adverting. So 5 sense door adverting depend on heart base always or sometimes. Sometimes? Always. So where do you find the Panchadvara Vajana in the chart? It is included in Manodhatu, right? So it depends on heart base always. And then Manodhara Vajana depends on heart base sometimes. And smile producing consciousness depend on heart base always. Then the 8 sense sphere wholesome depend on heart base sometimes. And then 8 resultants heart base always. And 8 functional sometimes. And then all 15 Rupavachara Chaitas all heart base always. And then Arupavachara, the first 4 wholesome. So Arupavachara Kusala heart base sometimes, and the 4 Vipakas or resultants no base at all. And then 4 Arupavachara Kiriya or functional sometimes. Now let us take the first column as Sotapatti Magga. So that Sotapatti Magga heart base always or sometimes, always. And the remaining 7 sometime. So you can exercise with the chart also. See, looking at the chart and say sometimes always, sometimes always. So with this we come to the end of chapter 3. Now chapter 3 deals with feeling, roots, function, doors, objects and bases. So Chaitasikas are not mentioned here, but if you want to, you can find out the Chaitasikas by using the chart for Citta and Chaitasika combination. So we have come to the end of 3 chapters, and we can review the 3 chapters, or we can review what we have learned in 3 chapters with the help of these handouts. So there are 3 chapters at a glance. It's very easy when you have these charts. Now we will not go through all of them because there are many, but there are some pages where we have to make corrections. Now the first page, now 3 chapters at a glance. Now first is the name of Citta, all in Pali, and second is the Citta group, whether akusala, lobamula, or kusala, ahituka, and so on. And then the Chaitasikas they arise together with, just the number of them. And then Vedana, the feeling they are associated with, and then Hetu, roots, Kicca, functions, and Dvara, doors, Aramana, objects, and Vatu, bases. So for each type of consciousness, we must be able to say which group each type of consciousness is, and how many Chaitasikas go with it, and so on. This is another way of making ourselves more familiar with what are taught in all 3 chapters. So the first one is called Somanasa Sahagata Ditthigata Sampayutta Asankharika. This is Pali. So that means with joy, with wrong view, unprompted. And this is akusala consciousness, and it is loba mula consciousness rooted in loba. And 19 Chaitasikas arise with this consciousness. And this consciousness is associated with somanasa or joy. And how many hetus go with it? Lobha and moha. And what function does it do? Javana. And then what door does it arise through? 6 doors always. And then what objects does it take? 81 lokiya. Lokiya means mundane. 81 mundane Cittas, 52 Chaitasikas, 28 rupas, and Panyati. Now, when we say a certain type of consciousness or a certain Citta takes something as object, we must understand that the Chaitasikas going along with that Citta take the same object. So with the first type of consciousness there are 19 Chaitasikas. These 19 Chaitasikas also take the 81 Lokiya Cittas and so on as object. So among the 19 there is Lobha. So Lobha can take 81 Lokiya Cittas, 52 Chaitasikas, 28 rupas and Panyati as object. And there is deity with among the 19 Chaitasikas. So deity can take again 81 Lokiya Cittas, 52 Cetasikas, 28 Rupas and Paññatti as object. What about pride or mana? Is it among the 19? You have to go back to the other chart. Okay. So, in this way, you understand the Cetasikas also, that a certain Cetasika takes a certain type of object. Now, in the 7th chapter, the different categories will be taught. Now, what I want to say here is the name 5 aggregates of clinging. Now, you find this expression in the first sermon taught by the Buddha, when Buddha explains the first noble truth, the noble truth of suffering. Buddha said, birth is suffering, old age is suffering, disease is suffering, death is suffering, and so on. And at the end, Buddha said, in brief, 5 aggregates of clinging are suffering. Now, it is taught that ditthi is called clinging and lobha is called clinging. We cling to things by lobha or by ditthi. That means we cling to things by being attached to that thing, or by wanting to possess that thing, and also we cling to that thing by taking it to be permanent and so on. Now, aggregate of clinging means aggregates that are the object of clinging. Now, here we have 2 terms, aggregates and aggregates of clinging. When we say aggregates, we mean all those that are called aggregates. How many aggregates are there? 5. Aggregate of matter, aggregate of feeling, of perception, of mental formations, and of consciousness. Now, aggregate of consciousness consists of how many cettas? 89 or 121 cettas. Okay. Now, in the name aggregate of clinging, or aggregate of clinging means aggregates that are the object of clinging. So, since lobha and ditthi are called clinging, and their object we see as 81 lokiya cetas, 52 cetasikas, 28 rupas and paññatti. That means no supramundane ceta. So supramundane cetas are outside of the range of lobha and ditthi. So when we say aggregate of clinging, we mean those that are object of lobha and ditthi. So 81 lokiya cetas, 52 cetasikas, 28 rupas and paññatti. But when we say just aggregates, we must take all. That means all 89 or 121 cetas, 52 cetasikas, 28 rupas and paññatti. Now, when you practice Vipassana meditation, you take these 5 aggregates of clinging as object. So the objects you put your mind on must be one of these 5 aggregates of clinging. That means one of these 81 lokiya cetas or 52 cetasikas, 28 rupas, no paññatti here. So that means you cannot take supramundane consciousness as object. when you practice Vipassana meditation. That is because you have not experienced the supramundane consciousness yourself, and so it is out of the range of your mind to take them as object. So when you understand the objects and those that take these objects, you can understand what the aggregate of clinging means and what aggregate means. You know the difference between aggregates and aggregates of clinging. So when we say aggregates, we mean all 89 cetas, cetasikas, rupas and paññatti. But when we say aggregate of clinging, we must leave out the supramundane consciousness. So we have only 81 mundane cetas, cetasikas, rupas and paññatti. Now let's go to second. Second ceta is called Somanasa Sahagata Ditthikata Sampayutta Sa Saṅgharika. Now Saṅghara means prompting, and Sa Saṅghara means with prompting, so prompted. And it is akusala ceta, and it is loba mula, rooted in loba. And there are 21 mental factors arising with this consciousness, and it is accompanied by joy, and it has two roots, loba and moha, and it functions as javana, and it arises through 6 doors always. And its objects are the same as number 1, so 81 lokiya cetas and so on. And it depends on hadayavatu sometimes, not always. Now number 3, Somanasa Sahagata Ditthikata Vipayutta Asaṅgharika, the third consciousness. It is akusala and it is loba mula. And the cetasikas arising together with this ceta are 19. And it is accompanied by joy and has 2 roots, loba and moha again, and it functions as javana, and it arises through 6 doors always, and its objects are 81 lokiya cetas and so on, and it depends on hadayavatu sometimes only. Now for number 1 there are 19 cetasikas, and for number 3 also there are 19 cetasikas. Although the number is the same, the individual cetasikas are different. Number 1 is with deity and without mana, and number 3 is with mana without deity. So the number is 19. Now fourth, Somanasa Sahagata Ditthikata Vipayutta Sa Saṅgharika. Now Vipayutta means not associated, not accompanied by. So not accompanied by deity. Sa Saṅgharika, with prompting. So it is akusala and loba mula. There are 21 cetasikas arising with it, and it is accompanied by somanasa, feeling. It has 2 roots, loba, moha, functions as javana, 6 doors always, and then 81 lokiya cetas and so on as object, and it depends on hadayavatu or heart base sometimes only. And number 5, upekha sahagata. Now 1 to 4 are somanasa sahagata, so they are with joy. Now they are with neutral feeling. So upekha sahagata ditthikata sampayutta asaṅgharika, and it is akusala loba mula and 18 cetasikas. It is accompanied by neutral feeling, and then the others are the same. And number 6, upekha sahagata ditthikata sampayutta sa saṅgharika, with prompting. Again akusala and loba mula, 20 cetasikas with it, upekha, feeling or neutral feeling, and 2 roots, lobha and moha, and javana function, 6 doors always, and 81 lokiya citas and so on as object, and depend on heart base sometimes. So you can use these charts to find out what are taught in the first 3 chapters. So you can find out how many Chaitasikas go with it, but you will get only the number. So if you want to know which Chaitasikas are these 19, 21 and so on, you go to another chart. So with the help of these charts, you can become very familiar with the teachings in these 3 chapters. Now second page, the same. Now please go to number 19. Number 19 is Upekha Sahagata Santirana, investigating with neutral feeling. So it is Ahetuka Citta, and it belongs to Akusala Vibhaka, resultant of unwholesome. There are only 10 Chaitasikas going along with it, and it is accompanied by Upekha or neutral feeling, and Hetu 0, because it belongs to rootless consciousness. But with regard to functions, it has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 functions. Patisandhi, relinking, bhavanga, life continuum, chuti, death, santirana, investigating, and tadaramana, registering. So it has 5 functions, and it arises through 6 doors, or it is door free. So when it functions as patisandhi, bhavanga and chuti, it is door free. When it functions as santirana and tadaramana, it arises through 6 doors. And its object, now 54 Kamavachara Citas, 52 Chaitasikas and 28 Rupas. And it depends on heart base always. And then next page, there is a correction to be made on that next page. Correct? You have to put in something. Number 26, Somanasa Sahagata Santirana. So it is Ahetuka Citta, and it belongs to Kusala Vibhaka, resultant of Kusala. And 11 Chaitasikas, its feeling is Somanasa and so on. But on the last column, there is nothing. So please add Hadaya always. So it depends on heart base always. So the other pages, there are nothing to be changed or corrected. So please turn to 78 Cittas. First Arupa, that means first Arupa Vachara Citta. Arupa Kriya. So instead of know what to, please correct it to Hadaya sometimes. And also number 79. Instead of know what to, Hadaya sometimes. And number 80, same. Hadaya sometimes. And number 81, Hadaya sometimes. And number 82, the A within the parenthesis is missing. So Hadaya always. And please go to 100. After 100, please correct to 101. not 102. That is Arhata Magga, 5th jhana. So that is 101. And then next one, 103, should be 102. Sotapatti Phala, 1st jhana. And the rest are correct. 103, Sotapatti Phala, 2nd jhana, and so on. So these charts will help you to find out what are taught in the 3 chapters very easily. I made them in 1994, and it took me some time to do this. So I have sweated on it, but you're lucky. So when studying something, we have to find different ways to use, different means or different devices to use, so that we become familiar with the subject. Now, as I said before, when we studied, we had to do them all by heart. But nowadays, memorizing is not so popular, and also you cannot memorize all these things. But if you can find what you want from these charts, I think it is okay. You do not need to memorize all these things. But say you want to know something, how many Citisikas go with, say, Hasitobara, and you don't know, then you can go back to the chart and say, then you know there. So if you can find what you want from the book as well as from the handout, I think it is satisfactory. And I want you to get more and more acquainted with those that are taught in these chapters. Because, as I said before, Abhidhamma is like a jigsaw puzzle. So until you come to the end, the picture will always be not complete. You will not, say, understand a little here and a little there. But please be patient. So after you come to the end, then you will understand all. And today we were joking about this. Now this is very easy. You just need to have this, and then consult it to know, say, how many Citisikas or what functions they do and so on. So in the United States there are series of books published, and they are called, say, for dummies. Now Unandi Sena said there is a book called Buddhism for Dummies, right? So he was suggesting, why not we write Abhidhamma for dummies? Okay. These 3 chapters are the basics of Abhidhamma, and we need to be familiar with the teachings here. And then we will go on to study some thought processes, not all completely, but some kinds of thought processes, because thought processes are very interesting, and it goes deep into the experience or practice. Now, karma is so powerful that it can produce thought moments at every moment of our life, almost every moment. Now, when we are not engaged in the vivid objects, then we are said to have life continuum. So that this life continuum will go all through our lives when there are no active thought movements arising. And when we study the consciousness, actually we study in series or in thought processes, especially the types of consciousness in the ahituka, rootless consciousness, can be understood fully when you understand the thought processes. And these thought processes are actually logical sequence of thought moments following one after another. Although they may be very difficult to see, because, as you know, mind or thought moments come and go more than 9 billion times a second. But still it is very interesting. Now, let us take the example of seeing. So we see something. So when we see something, we think that we see immediately. But as I said on the first night, we have to go through, or our mind has to go through many thought processes in order for us to be able to say, I see a man. And you have studied the seeing consciousness. Now, we see with seeing consciousness, and that seeing is very rudimentary. We do not even know whether it is red or blue or whatever, but with that consciousness, we just see the object, or we just experience the object. We do not yet know whether it is a cup, or it is a man, or it is blue, or it is yellow. So we see the visible object with eye consciousness, and we see the shape or form with mind or mental thought processes. Now, seeing seems to be very simple experience. We see every day, we are always seeing something, and so it is so familiar with us that we think it is very simple, a simple experience, seeing something. But if we understand Abhidhamma, if we understand the thought processes, now we know that seeing is a very complex experience. We need many thought processes in order to see one thing. Now, when no objects are presented to the doors, our mind is something like at rest. That means bhavanga moments are going on at that time. But when an object is presented to us, or when an object comes into the avenue of our senses, then that bhavanga begins to vibrate, because that object, as it were, strikes at the sense doors as well as at the bhavanga or mind door. So suppose a visible object comes into the avenue of our eye, then that visible object strikes or come into contact with the eye door as well as with the mind door, which is life continuum, and so the life continuum is disturbed. So first it shakes or it vibrates, and then it stops. So vibrating is one moment and stopping is another moment. But before vibrating, one thought moment passes. When the visible object strikes at the eye, then before vibrating, one moment of bhavanga passes, because bhavanga is flowing so rapidly that it is difficult to stop as soon as the object is presented. So one bhavanga passes, and then next moment it vibrates, it shakes, and then the next moment, let us call it the third moment, it ceases or it stopped. So now we have three thought moments after the object has come into the avenue of the senses or of the eye. So Number one is past bhavanga. And number two, vibrating bhavanga. At that moment, the bhavanga shakes. And then the third is a rest bhavanga. So that is the last bhavanga movement. And next movement is I-door adverting. Actually, this is 5 sense door adverting. But for this particular thought process, it can be called I-door adverting. So at that moment, the mind is turned to the object. So that moment is one thought moment. After the mind has turned to the object, it sees the object. So the next moment is seeing consciousness or I consciousness. After seeing, the mind receives or accepts the object. So there is receiving. After receiving, it investigates the object. So there is investigating. And then it comes to a conclusion that it is a desirable object or it is undesirable object. So that moment is called determining. And after determining comes 7 moments of jhana, full experience of the object. So there are normally 7 movements of jhana running. And after the 7 movements of jhana follow 2 movements of dadaramana, registering. So at the second registering, what number do you see above it? 17. So that means the life of one material property has ended. Since the life of one material property has ended, this thought process also ended, and so it is followed by bhavangas or stream of bhavanga. So this is a very simple thought process regarding visible object. Now, it is taught in Abhidhamma that matter is 17 times longer in life than mind. That means matter lasts for 17 thought moments. But thought moments or cettas just arise and disappear in one moment. Now you see the 3 circles or zeros. So they represent the 3 sub-moments of one moment. So in one moment, now that one moment is very brief, 9 billionth of a second. So these 3 represent the 3 sub-moments of one moment. And the first one is arising. The second one is, it is translated as presence or continuing. And the third one is disappearing. So these are called 3 sub-moments. In order to show that there is nothing in these moments, the zeros are used. It is there is no substance, no atta, and so on. So in order to show that the zeros are used. So one thought moment consists of 3 sub-moments. And the life of a material property is the duration of 17 thought moments. So the visible object that comes into the avenue or that strikes the eye and the mind begins at number 1. So at that moment, the object strikes at the eye door. But at that moment, bhavanga is not disturbed yet. It passes one moment because it has been running swiftly. At the second moment, it vibrates, and at the third moment, it stops, and so on. So altogether, there are 17 thought moments in this thought process, because when it reaches 17 thought moments, the visible object disappears. So this is one thought moment regarding seeing a visible object. Now you can identify those moments with consciousnesses you found among ahituka cetas, the rootless consciousness. Now how many can you identify? 5 sense door adverting, and then eye consciousness, receiving, investigating, determining, they are all from rootless consciousness. And then 7 jhanas. From where? They may be kusala or akusala or functional kiriya. And it is said that only during these 7 moments of jhana do you acquire karma. With the moments before the 7 jhanas, they are either resultant consciousness or functional consciousness. Now, the sense door adverting, what consciousness is it? Wholesome or unwholesome, or resultant or functional? 5 sense door adverting is functional. And then seeing consciousness, resultant. Receiving, resultant. Investigating, resultant. Determining, again functional. Because determining is manodvara vajana, mind or adverting. So until the process reaches the 7 moments of jhana, there is no such thing as karma. Because karma is volition that is associated with either kusala, wholesome, or akusala, unwholesome. So when the process reaches the 7 thought moments, then there may be kusala or akusala, depending on what kind of attitude you have towards the object. If you have the wise attention, that means if you have a correct attitude towards the object, the jhanas will be wholesome. If you have no wise attention, then jhanas will be unwholesome. Now, if you are attached to the object you see, then there will be lobha, unwholesome. If you see the statue of a Buddha and you have joy, or you experience rapture or piti, then it will be kusala. So, only during the 7 moments of jhana do you acquire karma. It may be good karma or it may be bad karma. It may be wholesome or unwholesome. Then after the jhanas, there are 2 moments of registering, and they are called tadharamana. That means taking the object of the jhanas. These tadharamanas are represented by 3 investigating consciousness and 8 sense sphere resultant consciousness. You have to go back to the functions to understand this. And these 2 are called tadharamana. That means taking the object that is taken by the jhanas. And they are compared to the water that follows the boat. So when the boat goes upstream, then water follows the boat a little. And also it is compared to aftertaste. You eat something and then at the end you swallow the remnants of the food with the saliva. And this thought process is explained with this simile. You may have that simile in one of the sheets. It is called mango simile. Oh yes. After Aramana, the page with types of objects at the top. So at the bottom you see mango simile for Citta Viti. A certain man with his head covered went to sleep at the foot of a fruiting mango tree. Then a ripe mango loosened from the stalk, fell to the ground, grazing his ear. Awakened by that sound, he opened his eyes and looked. Then, stretching out his hand, he took the fruit, squeezed it, smelled it, ate it enjoying it, swallowed it together with his saliva, and went to sleep again. So this is a simile to understand the thought process. So the man sleeping under the mango tree is like bhavanga. So during the bhavanga moment, you are like sleeping. So bhavanga is like the man sleeping under the tree. Then a ripe mango loosened from the stalk. That means an object impinging on the sense organ. That means striking the sense organ. So it is like the mango falling down, grazing his ear. Awakened by that sound, so now he turns to the object. He is awakened and he turns to the object. So that is like Panchadvara Vajana. And then he opened his eyes and looked. When he looked, he sees. So there is this is like Chakku Vijnana, eye consciousness. Then stretching out his hand, he took the fruit. That means he takes the fruit, he receives the fruit. So this is like Sampatichana. And then he squeezed it to see whether it is ripe or not. So that is Santirana, investigating. And then he smelled it. That means now it is ripe, or it is not ripe. But in this case, because he enjoyed it, it must be a ripe mango. So it is ripe. That is like Vattabana determining. And after determining, he ate it, enjoying it. He ate the mango. That is Javana. And after that, he swallowed it together with the saliva. That means he swallowed the remnant, the particles of mango with the saliva and swallowed them down. So that is like the dharamana, or registering. And then went to sleep again. That means bhavanga again. If you remember this simile, you understand at least this thought process. So this is thought process for seeing. Now, when you know the thought process for seeing, you can easily know the thought process for hearing and so on. So you hear something, you just substitute eye consciousness with ear consciousness, nose consciousness, tongue consciousness, and body consciousness. And this process is called Panchadvara, 5-door thought process, because it arises through one of the 5 doors. One of the 5 doors means eye door, ear door, nose door, tongue door, and body door. Now the first 3, the past bhavanga, vibrating bhavanga, and arrested bhavanga, they are inactive thought moments. and they do not take the visible object as object. What object do they take? Although the visible object is presented to the eyes, let us say, and then these three bhavanga moments arise and disappear, mind has not taken the object yet. So the object of these three moments of bhavanga is not the present visible object. So what is the object of these three? So you remember the object of door-free consciousness, karma or sign of karma or sign of destination. So any one of these three is the object of the first three moments. But beginning with the five sense door adverting, or here eye adverting, the consciousness takes the present visible object as object. And so it goes on until it reaches the 17 thought moments at the second registering, and then the visible object disappears. Since the visible object disappears, this thought process has come to an end, and so bhavanga moments again arise. There may be thousands of bhavanga moments before there arises another thought process. Now this is the basic thought process when we see something. But after the end of this thought process, you have not seen, let us say, the man. You have seen just the visible object. So in order to see the man, you need more thought processes. This is just seeing the visible object in the man. A man is made up of small material properties, and the only material property that is visible is called visible object. So only one of the 28 can be seen by the eye. The others are understood by mind. So with this thought process, we have just seen the visible object, not yet the man. So in order to see the man, we need some more thought processes. Actually, we need how many more? 4 types of thought processes before we can say that I see a man. And these 4 thought processes are not through eye door, they are through mind door. That is why yesterday I said I see the visible object with the eye, and I see the shape or form with my mind. So we will talk about the other thought processes tomorrow. But now we see how complex an experience that seemed to be very simple. Now we have to go through 17 thought moments, but they are not all. So we need many more thought processes and 4 kinds or 4 types of thought processes in order to be able to say I see a man, and we will study these thought processes tomorrow.
We shall continue tomorrow. Please rise. Please rise. Please rise. Please rise. Please rise. Please rise.